But when we do, we typically eat those on the spot because there's so few of them.
Alan Benoit is a local award-winning architect, but one doesn't have to dig too deep to see that his roots are really grounded in the garden. He became a master gardener in the late 90s and completed a 3-year certificate of native plant studies at the New England Wildflower Society in 2000. We all remember Alan and his wife Nancy because their home was on our garden tour in 2016. Today's talk, Biodiversity Through Permaculture, will introduce you to principles of permaculture which you can integrate into your own landscape. He will present examples they have used in their gardens and show how permaculture has stimulated a surprising variety of species to flourish in their yard. Alan, it's yours.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me to speak today. Thanks for the library for hosting us. Thanks to GNAT for filming today so the rest of the community can enjoy this as well. I have like 150 slides to get through, and some of them are actually videos, which you should enjoy. So if you have questions burning, feel free to ask them. Just raise your hand and I'll try to get to you. But I am a little pressed for time, so I'm going to just keep moving along. Anything else? I think that's it for now. So we're going to get going. What was that? No, if you need them down, I'm fine. Thank you. So as it was mentioned, I'm a local architect. Been in architecture for about 20 years now. And I really started as somebody who enjoyed being outside, and I really connected with nature at a young age. So that's really where biodiversity and landscaping and those elements came into my life. From when I was a child, I used to have to walk to school, so I would walk through the woods to school, walk through the woods to get home. My summers I spent camping or playing in the woods, so I connected with nature early on. That's probably what led me to architecture in the end, but it's been with me for a while. 2003, 2013. Some years ago, our gardens were published in Organic Gardening magazine, so you can see articles there. We were also in Country Gardens magazine a few years later, and more recently in 2017, we were just in Vermont magazine. So if you haven't seen those, we have links to those on our website, or you might be able to dig through their archives. So just to give you a little more history on us and our garden, for 28 years I've been keeping a daily garden journal. So I keep track of everything that's going on. It's going to be a noisy presentation. So every night before I fall asleep, I try to record the high and low temperature, thank you, of the day, the weather, how much snow or rain we've gotten, what's blooming in the yard, what birds or plants or animals I've seen, so what we've harvested in the vegetable garden. So this is this is 10 years, so it's pretty neat. It keeps track 2002, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all the way through. So it's 10 years on one single page, and I have almost 3 journals filled. But it's a great thing. If you don't have a garden journal, it's a great way to say, hey, the same thing happened last year on the same day, and it's amazing how many times that's happened to me. You can see the 3 highlighted items were all the same thing happening on the same day back then. So looking for today, mid-October, our witch hazel is in full bloom, our colchicums are blooming, we've been picking the last of our apples and the raspberries. We usually get our first hard frost, which we had last night, and we often will see on a sunny, clear day, we'll see the geese flying south at very high elevations. So that's something you can look for this week. It's going to be raining pretty hard tomorrow, so you probably won't see any geese. So this is our house and yard. We have a small apple orchard out front, or a fruit orchard with apples, pears, peaches, cherries, plums. We own less than an acre. So if you're looking from a satellite, that's our lot. It's about 94 feet wide and about 400 feet deep. And that's our neighbor's lawn. So you can see there's a little bit difference between those two lots, right? One's flat and green, and the other one is very varying in height and plantings. We have over 10 ornamental grasses. These are all different varieties, 50 perennial varieties, 15 different varieties of shrubs, 8 different kinds of roses, 9 different kinds of herbs, 5 different types of fruit trees, 4 different nuts, and 5 different berries, plus we have asparagus and rhubarb. And the important thing about all these that I've just listed is they're perennial. The only thing we plant once a year is our vegetable garden, but everything else comes back year after year after year. And especially permaculture focuses on the food crops. So, permaculture is kind of a combination of 2 words, permanent and agriculture. So you're basically trying to grow things to sustain you or the environment, or to better the animals and plants that live in your area by creating this permanent habitat and permanent food source. And like everything, it has a list of principles, and a list of theories, and a list of layers, the different zones. So I'm going to go through those quickly so you can get a feel for what it is by the book, but then we're going to kind of explain of how we did it and what the benefits of doing that are. So there's 12 different permaculture design principles. So there's Alan on a step ladder in the orchard with a camera in his hand. So the first one is to observe and interact. That is me observing, if I've never seen myself observing before. So you're supposed to engage with nature, find out what's going on, come up with design solutions. So here I'm watching, I had some infestation of aphids on the plum tree, and I was trying to figure out, okay, what's going on, why are there so many aphids, and what can I do? And it was interesting to learn that there were a lot of beneficial insects already taking care of it. So I just kind of recorded the event. So the next principle is to catch and store energy. We try to do this via our cold frame. So in the winter, we grow greens right through the winter. This was a smaller than usual cold frame for us, but you can easily make it out of a couple of sash windows and some bales of straw. This year's is going to be about 5 times that size. So obtain a yield. Anybody recognize these nuts? We grow them in our yard. They're hardy. It's hazelnuts. So this year we got about 5 gallons of hazelnuts from our bushes. So obtain a yield is principle number 3. So the idea is to not just grow stuff because it's beautiful, but grow stuff so that it actually feeds you or nurtures you somehow. Principle number 4 is to apply self-regulation and accept feedback. So this disgusting close-up is of slugs eating our potato plants. Early in the morning we had potato beetles. So what I've learned now to do with our potatoes is we put like a row cover over them, and that keeps some of the insects from getting in there. And if you tuck it in, it can even help with the slugs. So just understanding that there's going to be ways to improve what you're growing in your yard, and you need to take action to make that happen. Principle number 5 out of 12 is to use renewable resources. We're fortunate enough that we have a community solar project out in Shaftesbury that we have bought shares into. So 100% of our electricity for our house, and then all of the heating, air conditioning, and lighting for our office and our studio are 100% taken care of by the solar panels we own. So we're what's called net zero. So you could do that. The good thing about buying a community solar project is no matter where you move, you can have that electricity sent to you. So they don't have to necessarily be on your house. We have a slate roof, so they couldn't be on our house. But if you have the right roof, it might be the answer for you. But we get zero. Our electric bill every month is $0.00, and it's a great feeling. This is probably the hardest principle. Principle 6 is to produce no waste. And try to do that today, right? 50 years ago, 100 years ago, when you just bought, burlap sacks and grains and everything was so much, there's so much less plastic in the way, and everything wasn't hermetically sealed at the grocery store. This is probably going to be the most challenging principle for anybody to meet, is to produce no waste. We have 2 compost bins. We're always filling one and using the other, and we alternate throughout the years. But that's probably the closest we get to producing no waste. Principle number 7 is to design from patterns to details. So this is a shot of our side patio right off the kitchen. And we found that there are certain patterns of sunlight that allow us to use different areas at different times. So you can see the shade in the foreground here just kind of taking over. So in the afternoon and evening, it's a nice cool shady spot. In the summer for us to eat dinner. In the fall, this stays sunny, so we often sit in front of the fireplace here in the fall. So you can actually learn from different patterns, the different microclimates that are created in your yard, and take advantage of those by using them for, in this case, an outdoor room or rooms, because we have a cooking grill here, so we have our kitchen, our dining room, and our living room outside. So principle 8 is to integrate rather than segregate. How many people came to our house for the garden tour? Nice, excellent. So one of the things that you had to do to get down to the studios, you had to go down this long flight of stairs, and that's because our property it's not flat, there's kind of 2 levels to it. So instead of just forgetting about that low, hard to reach area, we put in this staircase and a little boardwalk, and that gave us all this extra gardening space, and we were able to incorporate that into our yard. So that's how we use principle 8. Principle 9 is to use small and slow solutions. So this is a dwarf conifer that we purchased from Bob Schuneman out in Ballin. You guys know him. But this tree is now 30 years old. In this picture, it was about 20 years old. But it's about 6 feet tall now, and it's 30 years old. So as you might have seen in the picture, we have a small house and a small yard and a small garden. So it makes sense for us to keep our plants and things small. So this is one of our ways to use small and slow solutions. What it's basically saying is don't make these knee-jerk reactions if something doesn't quite work or whatever. Make little changes and see how that affects things. Principle 10 is to use and value diversity. I think we do this pretty well through our diversity of plantings. We have, because our house is kind of a cottage, we have a cottage garden out front, and there's probably 30 or 40 different perennials just in there. But we also combine in things like rhubarb and thyme and oregano, so it's not just flowers, it's also food and herbs. Principle 11 is to use edges and to value the marginal. I'm assuming that's talking about land. So this is our driveway on the right side. This is our potato bed. We own about 7 feet, I think, on the left side of our driveway. And in that 7 feet, we have about 30 asparagus plants. That's that back row of tall stuff. We have clematis and roses to attract the pollinators. We have raspberries mixed in with the flowering plants, and then we have our potato bed right along the driveway. So squeezing in as much as we can. The asparagus come back bigger and bigger every year. The raspberries, we get about 2 cups every day that we have to pick, almost all from frost to frost. And then the potatoes we kind of harvest. We're about halfway through picking our potatoes. Just try to get them before the ground freezes solid. But a great way to use the edges. And principle 12 is to creatively use and respond to change. So originally our patio ended here, down at the bottom left of the screen. This is where we built the fireplace, so we learned that we really wanted to use more of our outdoor space because we have such a small house. By extending that landscape out into the garden really helped us enjoy the yard and the outdoors more. This used to be a garage. It is now our office. It was a dining room in between. So again, we're trying to respond to change, so we needed a bigger office, bigger than the hallway that I was working in. And now we have room for 10 in our, what used to be a garage is now our office. So that's a creative way to respond. So there were 7, but now there are 8 layers in permaculture. So the layers are basically just talking about the different, if you will, heights of plantings. It's probably the best way to look at it. So the tallest being the canopy, so the mature trees that are growing, 60 feet tall and are up and above. That is the first layer of permaculture. The second is the understory trees, so things like dogwoods, fruit trees, birches, those kind of things that fill in underneath. Melanchia, shadblow, whatever, that's a great understory tree. So then there's the shrub layer. For us, it's our witch hazel, our raspberries, blackberries, roses, lilacs could probably fit in there as well. Then the 4th layer is the herbaceous layer. So for us, it's our perennials. There's no shortage of herbaceous plants, I'm sure, in all of your gardens. Then the 5th layer is the ground cover. So you can see we're going from up to middle to now we're down on the ground. So the things that cover the ground, these could be, ginger or ferns or clover or mosses, depending on the sun conditions. Pachysandra and vinca used to be the go-to ground covers back in the day. And then now we're getting below ground, so the rhizosphere. It's where the roots grow, or your potatoes grow, or the irises, the daylilies, all those things that grow from bulbs. That's in the rhizosphere. Come on. And then the 7th layer is the vertical layer. So your vines, your things that grow vertically, they can start on the ground and grow 40, 50, 60 feet. This is our climbing hydrangea, which wraps half of the front of the house and half of the side of the house now. And then the newest added 8th layer is the fungi, and this might not actually be a fungi, but Indian pipes. But it's plants that exist entirely underground. And once in a while they'll send up a flower, if you will, for you to see. So we have had morels growing in our lawn. Anybody else have morels growing in their yard? Nice. That's not a bad thing to find in the spring, is it? All right, we're getting through all of the homework. So there are 5 permaculture zones. There's really 6, the 6th zone being zone 0, which is your house. So in their chart here, basically the further away from your house you get, the more unmanicured, the more natural, the more wild the spaces get. And I'm going to show you what this bullseye looks like on our yard. So that's really what we have. Nothing circular about it. So zone 1 is areas that need frequent attention. For us, it's the berries, because we have to pick them every day, the herbs, cold frames, anything that you have to really take care of on a daily basis. Zone 2 is for the perennials, the fruit orchards, the compost bins, so things you might visit once a week or occasionally, but still pretty readily. Zone 3, these are where most of your food crops are grown, so in our case it's the vegetable garden, which is way up near the street. And then zone 4 is the semi-wild area. So for us, we kind of call it the wildlife corridor. So we have trees, actually kind of hedgerow on this side and trees planted on this side. It's kind of areas where you would normally go foraging. You know, if we lived in a little bit bigger yard than less than an acre, we might call it that. And they say for firewood or things like that. So foraging and firewood, that's zone 4. And then zone 5 is the wilderness area. So half of our property we have left completely wooded. So that's kind of a reserve for plant species and animals and birds, molds and bacteria. So the back 200 feet of our property we just leave as a reserve area. So why do we do this? Suspense. Any questions while I'm getting this puppy running? So permaculture also includes domestic animals. Considering we have about less than a half an acre of area to work with, we don't have domesticated producing animals like chickens or pigs or geese or rabbits. But we do have wild rabbits, at least 2 that live in our yard. We have all kinds of squirrels. We've got red squirrels, black squirrels, gray squirrels, chipmunks. You guys, anybody else seeing black squirrels occasionally? Yeah, they're making a comeback. And we have a fox. We have 2 foxes actually. One we call Scruffy because he might have the mange or something. He's got hair problems. His tail kind of looks like a little pom-pom on the end of a rope. But we have 2 foxes. And we have this bird bath in the back of our property. I'm going to try to, are these going to work? Worked yesterday. Dang. Oh, here we go. So the bird bath gets visited by the fox. Surprisingly enough, when they're thirsty, they will drink from our bird bath. Bird bath gets visited by the raccoons. Apparently we have 2 raccoons that come to our yard.
Where's your camera?
Camera is, it's on the back of one of our sheds facing the bird bath, so it's kind of, the woods are right at that edge that you can kind of see where the tree line, this is the tree line or the woods area starting here. This is kind of the end of our yard or lawn. And the bird bath gets visited by Mr. Black Bear. We actually had 2 black bears, 2 different black bears this year come through. And we don't live far from town. We're maybe a half a mile from here. We're on town water and sewer, so we're not in the woods. And then occasionally we'll get a fisher cat in our backyard. This one is a female fisher cat pulling away one of our opossum. So it's probably weighs about the same as she does, but she's getting a better grip there before she drags it off. But even fisher cat will visit our yard, and a lot of it has to do with the way we have planted our yard. We make it very welcoming to all species. So there's a lot of biodiversity, and that's what I'm here to talk about. So birds, we've identified over 40 different species of birds in our yard. Sometimes we've had 10 at one time, 10 different species, not just 10 birds. And this past, not this summer, but the previous summer, we had a nesting pair of ruffed grouse in our backyard, in our backwoods, that little half an acre of woods that we kept. Nancy had spotted them, my wife Nancy back there, and I was like, nah, that couldn't have been a ruffed grouse. Must have been a neighbor's chicken. And I spotted them shortly thereafter, and sure enough, we had ruffed grouse in our backyard, so it's pretty neat. So the more we've been implementing permaculture, the more we have been seeing an influx, an increase of the species around us. And we have different habitats, and not just different layers, but also sun conditions and shade conditions. We have an immense variety of flowering plants, so we attract a lot of beneficials. And we grow asparagus, so we're growing food, but asparagus also attracts the asparagus beetle and Japanese beetles, so even something that's a food crop can actually create habitat for other species. On a more positive note, when you're stacking firewood or making a stone wall, you're actually creating habitats for small animals. So we always have chipmunks when we're bringing in the firewood. We always find chipmunk nests. Stone walls, great habitat for certain bees, crickets, spiders, snakes. So this is one of our crickets eating one of our vinca flowers. Has anybody ever seen a cricket eating before? Well, get ready. So this is a cricket. He's chewing right now, but he picked one of the buds off of our vinca, like a corn on the cob. And you'll see him, he'll pick it up and start chewing on it. So this is right on our patio. Just happened to be at the right place at the right time. So he's chewing his cud there for a little while. Once he gets that bite down, you'll see him take another bite. So pretty wild. So he's actually helping us, compost, if you think about it. He's a little shy, so he runs away. Tree frogs. We've had tree frogs on our house, in the yard, in our house. Frogs are great. We have frogs and toads. One year I was digging up the potatoes. The ground had frozen about 4 inches down, and once you break through that layer, the ground's still pretty soft. So I was digging up potatoes, and one of the potatoes I dug up was actually a hibernating toad, or a toad and topper. And apparently what they'll do is they'll just keep burrowing down as the ground freezes above them. They'll burrow down deeper and deeper. So this guy was down about 16, 18 inches when I found him. So, and then by using ground covers like straw that allow the water to go through and they break down, they actually create habitats. So it's creating habitats for ground beetles and centipedes and millipedes and pill bugs and earwigs and all those things you love. And then when we put in our patio, you can see we kind of have thyme and different crawling, flowering things growing in between the stones. But we didn't really expect that it was going to create this whole new habitat. We have, of course, you have ants burrowing down and making holes. That's no big deal, right? Is this a video? No, this is a video. So there's ants running down in the hole, grabbing a rock and carrying it out and putting it down, and grabbing another rock and putting it down. And that's what they spend their day doing. So ants, no big deal. But how about a wasp that hunts spiders? We have those in our patio. So this wasp goes out, finds a spider, paralyzes it with its venom, but it keeps it alive, so it's kind of still alive through the experience. And then it'll lay its egg inside, and then put the spider in the hole and allow its young to feed on the spider when it's hatched. So, not a bad life, right? So first it burrows down and makes this hole that it thinks is going to be big enough to fit its prey or its catch. And then it tries desperately to pull the spider down into the hole with it. And you can see that's right between the slate of our patio that this is going on. I was like, I can't believe this is happening. You can see the spiders still, oops, I skipped, sorry. And then eventually you'll see the spider's arms disappearing down into the hole. So, you know, have you sat on your patio and watched a spider be dragged into a hole before? Yeah, pretty cool. So, believe it or not, we have like 4 or 5 different species of tunneling wasps living in our patio, which we would have never expected. This one's obvious. It has this long, skinny abdomen and this, you know, little red band, but see how long and skinny that is? And it digs a hole deeper than it is long, so maybe about 1.5 inches, 2 inches deep. So it goes down and grabs a handful of stones and flies away and drops them. And, no, I think it's going to chase that animal away. Yeah, don't come near my hole. So it goes down and you'll see it like using its front arms, legs, to pull out a handful of gravel, and then it flies away and it'll disperse the gravel. So we know it's there because there's always these little piles of gravel on the slate. And then we have a different kind of wasp. This one feeds primarily on leafhoppers. You can see it's a completely different type of wasp. If you look close here, you can see it's got a little shield bug or something, leafhopper, in between its legs down there. Not the easiest thing to see, but you get a glance of it every once in a while. He can't find the hole that he wants to put it in. And then this one, you can actually see the leafhopper beetle being pulled into the hole. You know, it's that thorn shape of a leafhopper beetle. Pretty crazy. And then the cool thing is that when any of these wasps are done doing their thing, they clean up after themselves. So they completely fill in the hole, and you know, they'll place stones like nobody was ever here, nobody will ever know that, you know, I've got this feast for my young planted in the middle of their patio. So just things to me that are pretty amazing that are happening right beneath our feet while we're eating lunch on the patio. This is an assassin bug. He now hunts on our patio. He's got a pretty good gait to him. But that's him running across the slate on the patio. And then not only the masonry of the patio, but the masonry of our house. We have a brick house, and there's random holes drilled in it for holding up, you know, the mailbox or whatever, the handrail. So we have these potter wasps that will, they do a similar thing. They'll lay their eggs and kind of fill in different layers with mud. And this is a different one. This might actually, I don't know if that was a video or not. Nope. And then even some mason bees or bumblebees will check it out. And then we get some not so attractive, this is on the thyme. This is again on our patio, eating the thyme. But anybody recognize this caterpillar? This is the morning cloak caterpillar. Again, it's one of those things, you see it, you take a picture of it, and then you go look it up in the book, and you're like, wow, that's pretty cool. So morning cloaks, this is the caterpillar of a skipper. Very alien looking thing, orange eyes, brown head, green body. I don't know if I've identified this, but we, all of these really strange looking worms that you see, and caterpillars and inchworms and things, turn into some kind of moth or butterfly. I call this guy Superman just because of the color scheme he's wearing. And then we get darning needles. I don't know if the darning needles and dragonflies think our patio might be water, because we often see, even the mayflies, we'll see them kind of skimming down and touching the stones. And I know like mayflies will like lay their eggs by doing that. That's kind of what the fly fisherman's recreating. But we get a surprising number of dragonfly-like insects on our patio as well. And then even areas that you wouldn't think anybody cares about, but if there's a little mud puddle that dries up overnight, butterflies, it's a safe place for them to land and drink. So even a mud puddle will attract insects. So that was just some of the guys living on the patio. This is more of specifically beetles. These are different beetles that we encounter. Everybody know this guy or girl? This is the Japanese ladybug, right? Chinese, Japanese. You can usually tell they have like a W on their forehead. I haven't seen many of our native ones anymore, but these guys really swarm in the spring and the fall. Fireflies, we have those. Ground beetles of all kinds. This is an American oil beetle. Actually can shoot like steaming hot oil out of its abdomen at a predator. So you can actually get burned by them when they squirt. Then we have our share of Japanese beetles. All kinds of, these are squash beetles that we get on our squash plants in the spring. And you can see how some of these things can reproduce extremely quickly. Aphids can especially reproduce like 4 generations. We get our share of aphids and weevils. This is a mole weevil on our hollyhock. This is an apple weevil on our apples. This is a shiny green and black striped weevil that I couldn't identify. But he posed for me, so I had to take his picture. And then we also get leaf miners inside the leaves. This is on our maca orange. So maybe not every insect is as popular, but it's still part of the biodiversity that we see. The greatest thing, though, is with having all these insects attracts birds. We timed and recorded in one day. We timed and recorded, this is a female house wren feeding her young. And she gets about 400 insects, usually like inchworm type insects, 400 a day that she harvests for us. So if we didn't have the insects, she wouldn't be there, and her young wouldn't be so prolific. So it's actually a good thing that we have both. And then we find things, this is a peanut shell in the bird bath, but then we find all these, I think they call them June bugs around here, but the crows apparently like both June bugs and peanuts, and they leave us the shells. I think that's it for 2. We're going all right for time. Any questions? Moving on to part 3.
Was your video of the ants speeded up?
No, that's them. The question was, is the video of the ants speeded up? But no, that's those little brown reddish ants doing their thing. So not only do we get some varieties of insects that are pests, but we also get a lot of beneficials. So there are bees and flies, and sometimes you can't tell the difference, and I'll show you why. But we have more than 10 different varieties of bees that we'll see in our yard. And that's not including wasps or flies or anything else, that's bees specifically. Honeybee here. This is the Russian honeybee. I guess a lot of people who keep bees have found that the Russian and Italian honeybees tend to be more hardy and more diligent, so you'll see more and more of those. They have the more black on their abdomen. We also have sweet bees, these little metallic green bees, kind of small. This is on one of our geraniums. This is the golden northern bumblebee. Everybody noticed that they have a bad habit of staying too long. So you wake up in the morning and they're kind of covered in dew, waiting for the sun to dry them out, warm them up. So this is a scene we see all the time. The cool thing is that we actually had a nest of bumblebees in our backyard a few years back. Not the greatest thing if you're mowing your lawn and not knowing they're there, but it was still a pretty cool experience. I think I can get the video. So they're not as neat as honeybees. They don't make these beautiful hexagonal cells and nice plain things. They actually took over a chipmunk hole, so they build their nest underground, and they combine like a wax with dried grasses to make their hives. And every once in a while, they'll go out and they'll harvest the dry, dead grass below the lawn, and they almost make like a conga line. So one guy will go out front and dig it up and push it to the next guy, and he'll push it, and eventually it gets to the hole. And then the last guy makes a ball out of it, and he tumbles usually down into the nest with it, and he spreads it out or gives it to the next team. So bumblebees working in the lawn. This is a red-tailed bumblebee, another one of our beneficials. So now we get into that quasi thing. So you can tell this kind of looks like a fly, but it kind of looks like a bee. So it's called the bee fly. But we have those in our yard. And then this guy, I can't remember, but again, you can see it's a fly. It's got the big eyes and it's got the wings that make it look like a fly, and the legs, and it's got the mouth parts. But it also does this mimic, so I don't know if it's just trying to, it evolved to try to keep predators away by getting the black and yellow stripes like it does here. But you can definitely see he has mouth parts, and he's licking the pollen off of the, what is that, a daylily maybe? Flower, but so definitely not a bee, right? And then we have these entertaining things. This is the butt end of a, believe it or not, this is its name, big, fat, hairy fly, okay? Imagine going through life with that name. But you can kind of see where he got his name. He's about the size of a bumblebee, and you can see the individual hairs all over its body. He hangs around our yard. Then we have these Taqman Flies. So these are actually beneficials. The way that I learned that we had these was our Japanese beetles would have these little white spots on them. And those are actually the eggs of the Taqman fly. And they hatch and burrow in and devour Japanese beetles. So whenever I'm picking Japanese beetles, I always put those aside because I want more and more of those flies so they can help me keep the population down. And then this is a syrphid fly. Again, it's a fly, but it's got the black and yellow stripes to kind of fake you out. But they're larvae, so it's a little bit blurry, but this long green inchworm-looking thing here with the dots and spots, plowing through, this is our elderberry, and this is all aphids. You can see this is an ant, so ants actually farm aphids to get the honeydew from them. So he's protecting his herd of aphids so he can eat their honeydew, but this fly larvae is just plowing right through, eating its way right down through all the aphids. Pretty cool, huh? And then this guy landed on my finger while I had my camera, so I took his picture. Robber fly. They hang around our vegetable garden a lot, and they'll just fly around and pick off insects. They'll stay up in a high spot, and they're almost like a hawk or a falcon, and they'll go down, and I think it has you can see it's got the head or a tail or something in there. And then there are species that aren't flies and aren't bees that are still beneficial. but they don't care so much who they eat, so they might eat a beneficial insect or they might eat a bad guy. So these are the predators. Anybody see the predator in that goldenrod? I'll zoom in a little bit. That's him. That's one of the jagged ambushed bugs. So that's his eyeball, that's his head. He's almost like a praying mantis. That's his forearms and his body's back here. But pretty well camouflaged, you know, right there in the goldenrod flower, just waiting for anybody to come along. Bunch. We also have goldenrod spiders. So they hang out in our Rosa rugosa. I don't know for a fact, but it looks to me like the color stripe on their back matches the flower, and I don't know if it's a chameleon kind of thing or if they're always just that color. But he helps with the Japanese and brown chafer beetles, so I don't have to take care of him. He also helps on the raspberries, eating whatever flies or bugs land on the raspberries. And then this is a close-up. This was a kind of a wow moment for me. I never knew where the eyes were on a daddy longleg. But if you look really close, they have like this little stalk and two little eyeballs up on this stalk. Isn't that wild? Like in the middle of its back are his eyeballs. Very alien looking. But daddy longlegs are constantly patrolling our yard for us. And they help a lot with the beetles and things. And like I mentioned, we have, this is the half-banded topper. They eat a lot of mosquitoes. Okay, now for some questions. Anybody recognize this? Not my sister. So it starts as an egg, it turns into this, then it turns into this, and then it turns into this. So when you see these around, be thankful. These are the ones that do all the eating, is the young pupa of the ladybug. So do not get rid of these because they eat more than their weight every day in aphids. So definitely worth keeping around. So often you can see, this is, I think this might have been the plum tree where I was taking those photographs earlier on. These are all aphids. And the ladybugs look for these patches of aphids, not to eat them, but to lay their eggs. And there's the ladybug eggs, and there's all the aphids. And you just have to be patient, and then the ladybug eggs hatch out. And there's kind of those little alien-looking things that just hatched out. And then there they go to work, right? They eat the aphids for you. And the more you have, the better, because they'll eat more and more aphids. So the worst thing you want to do when you see this is to get your spray out, right? And kill everything, because you're also killing the things that are going to help you. So the more you can restrain yourself, the more these guys can eat, and the more they'll come back year after year. And I say these guys are actually having a tug of war with an aphid. They're both biting it at the same time, like saying, no, it's mine, you know? So pretty amazing how much they'll eat. But not just the ladybugs, we also have lacewings. So lacewings will do very similar to the ladybug. They'll lay their eggs, and then this is the lacewing larvae, who also likes eating aphids. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture of him doing that, but I've got him on the same leaf, so you can only use your imagination. So we also have wasps. So something to think about with wasps is it's often the smallest ones. So this is a rhubarb flower. So if you've ever seen a flower of a rhubarb, you know, it's like this big, and this is just one tiny stalk. So that guy's about the size of the tip of a pencil. But these are some of the more beneficial ones, the parasitic wasps. So, anybody know this guy? This is the tobacco hornworm, which also eats tomatoes. We don't see too many tomato hornworms here. We see a lot of tobacco hornworms. And the difference is this has like a white chevron on its back. That's what tells it apart. But when the tobacco hornworm is eating your tomatoes, the parasitic wasps will come and lay their eggs. and the eggs will go hatch, and they'll go inside, and the larvae will eat the tomato and tobacco hornworm, and then you can see like there's these little covers, so these have actually hatched and flown off, so they've become wasps to continue the cycle. So they're going to go eat the rest of the tobacco hornworms for me. Then we also have Yellowjackets, and believe it or not, Yellowjackets are pretty helpful with the tobacco hornworm on our tomatoes as well. They love protein, and they just dive in there, eat them. They make meatballs out of it, and they'll bring the meatballs back, believe it or not, to the rest of the colony, and that's how they get their protein. We also have wasps that catch crickets and grasshoppers. Happen to get a shot of this guy. So the way to encourage beneficial insects is to have a great variety, practice permaculture, have a variety of different tree species and plant species and flower species, different heights, different habitats and nesting areas, and try not to spray because you're killing them both. You're killing the pests and the beneficials, and the less you use your sprayer, the more beneficials are going to be able to survive and increase. It's kind of a tidal wave of pests that happen before the beneficial insects can get up to speed, but once they reach their capacity, they can take care of them pretty much themselves. For Japanese beetles, they don't know how to fly, they just like falling, so you put something soapy and wet under them and they'll fall right in for you, so they're pretty easy to take care of, a lot of the beetles. And then try to have things that are blooming early on. This is colt's foot, which is probably the first thing to flower in Vermont in the spring. So you can see this flybee or big fat hairy fly or whatever he is, already eating that first thing in the spring. And then this time of year into October and November, you can still have colchicum and witch hazels and other varieties still blooming. So if you feed them much through the year, they'll be able to survive the winter a lot easier. And include plants that have really tiny flowers, because a lot of these beneficial insects are pretty small and need those small flowers to feed on. And if you give them a good home and plenty of food, they'll take care of the rest. And that's a dead beetle, and that's the end. Thank you. I hope this presentation has encouraged you to embrace permaculture and to consider maybe how you can incorporate it into your landscape and maybe introduce a few things that you hadn't thought of before. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Yes?
The ladybugs, some have spots and some don't. Are the ones that have spots bad?
No, there are all kinds of ladybugs and lady beetles, and some are spotted and some are not spotted. They're all in the same genus, but different varieties. But there are a lot of different ones. We get almost all the Asian ladybugs for whatever reason in our yard. Good question. Yes?
Do you have experience with plants that bring nutrients up to other plants? I think they call them dynamic accumulators.
Yeah. So I think comfrey is one of those. So a lot of plants that. So the question was, are there certain plants that'll bring nutrients up from deeper in the soil to help feed other plants? And it's usually plants that have large tap roots. So the rhubarb will do that. Dandelions will do that. Comfrey will do that. Hollyhock. So anything that you know as a gardener that has a long tap root will actually help bring up some of those nutrients. A great question. Certainly part of permaculture. Yes?
Do you fertilize in the fall or the spring? Do you use plant home, anything like that?
I do not fertilize much. Sometimes I will use, like in the potato bed, if I use the same potato bed 2 years in a row, I'll use, it's like crab shells and clam shells. It's kind of like a mixture of natural organic food source. But otherwise, we do not fertilize. You could certainly fertilize. We try to use all of our compost. And I think it's mostly those places where you're trying to grow food multiple years in a row that you'll see that you'll deplete the nutrients and they won't grow quite as healthy. But otherwise, if they have the right conditions, most of our perennials will flourish with the sun and the soil that they have. Any more questions? Yes.
I use neem oil,
Yes.
but it seems to me it's going to have a negative impact on all those little creatures that are running all over the plant. So
Yeah, so she was saying that she uses neem oil and she's curious how that affects other insects as well as the beneficials. And I'd say if you can be very particular where you use it, not just spray it willy-nilly, but be very focused if you have a specific spot that has an issue and you know it has an issue. But you might want to look to see if there's other, like ladybug eggs or ladybug larvae or something that are already there, and just use caution. But yes, so I do have, on some of my fruit trees, I do put like a dormant oil on the bark, especially to get them through the winter. So occasionally I will use a similar, it's cottonseed oil, I think, but not often. Yes, back there.
We're talking about yield. How does your yield compare to a conventional kind of row crop or greenhouse horticulture operation?
Yeah, I'll start by saying we do not focus on our yields as much as if I was doing this for a living or to sustain ourselves, we would be much more focused on how much food we can produce off of our half an acre. We visit the farmer's market throughout the year, and we still go to the grocery store. So we're not focused on that. So we have a very small vegetable garden. If I was focused on the yield, I would have a much larger vegetable garden. We do have 20 hazelnut trees, 5 black walnuts, 2 chestnuts, 3 peaches, 3 pears, 5 apples, plum trees, cherry trees. So we do our best to produce what we can, but we still have a driveway and lawn and a very small lot. So we just kind of accept what we get for a yield. But definitely, if you were going to do this more intensely on a larger site and a less ornamental garden, yield would be important. Okay, well, thank you all for coming out.